Thursday afternoon, 4 p.m. in Switzerland. It's Space Café Scotland time. Our Space Café Scotland with Angela Mathis will begin soon. We would like to thank ESA Space Solution for their great support for our event series. As always, we really appreciate your participation and ongoing feedback. We will learn and improve based on what you give us. My name is Chiara Monter, and I'm the event coordinator at SpaceWatch.Global and host of the Space Café Benelux, together with my co-host, Barnu Bazingi. SpaceWatch.Global is a Switzerland-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. And with Angela Mathis, CEO of Think Tank Maths, we have found a great friend and a wonderful host for our outreach in Scotland. I know that many of you are already familiar with our website, our bi-weekly and daily newsletter, and the Space Café podcasts. Our latest episode follows a fascinating spaceport hidden away on the Shetland Islands, so give that a listen. We also like to keep our fan shop online open for you to support us actively and become a space watcher. Edition 1 has cool items for you, which you can see if Angela shows her t-shirt, for the ones you love and for your friends. So we need your support in order to keep our work alive for you. If you've missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive on our webpage in the events section and on our YouTube channel. And we will host our Space Café Scotland live regularly. And with that, my job is done. And I would like to hand you over to your host for today, Angela. Over to you.
So hello, Space Watchers. I'm Angela Mathis. Sorry, that's the pronunciation. It's French. We're here today because we're going to discuss how could Scotland lead by example to develop an end-to-end sustainable new space industry. And a big step towards that goal is the Scottish Space Leadership Council initiative, which is called the Sustainable Space Challenges. It's a bold and brave approach to the space economy in Scotland and the UK. And with me today to talk about these very important themes are Kirstina Tamane, who is the Space and Satellite Business Development Lead at the University of Edinburgh, a member of the Scottish Space Leadership Council, as am I. Daniel Smith, who's the founder of the AstroAgency, and he is the co-chair of the Scottish Space Leadership Council, known as the SSLC. I might not say it in full every time. And both Kirstina and Daniel co-chair the Scottish Space Leadership Council Subcommittee on Space Environment and Sustainable Space. And how lucky are they to be in the same room today? The rest of us are all having to do the isolation thing. In any case, together they created this Sustainable Space Challenge campaign. And Dr. Moriba is with us, Associate Professor of the Aerospace Engineering and Engineering Mechanics at the University of Texas at Austin. He's a space environmentalist. Some might say the space environmentalist. Check out his commitments, his activities, his profile. I think you'll think he merits that title. He was a judge on the Sustainable Space Challenge, and Scotland was very grateful to have him give his input, along with all the other judges. And a very well-kent, as we say here, a very well-kent face and voice on the SpaceWatch.Global with his own series of Moriba's Vox Populi. We also have Dr. Massimiliano Vasile. Welcome, Max. Max is the director of the Aerospace Centre of Excellence, Strathclyde Space Institute at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, Scotland. He leads the STARDUST, our project, and Max can explain later to us the achievements and goals of the STARDUST programme. And he is also part of the Sustainable Challenge workshops. Welcome all. Thank you for joining us. So to lead off, Kirstina, Daniel, between the two of you, explain for us all the why, the who, what happened, and more importantly, what actions and learning came from the Scottish Space Leadership Council Sustainable Space Challenge campaign and the workshops. Over to you guys.
Sure. So I think so in terms of background, it all started with John Innes, who's the former chair of the Leadership Council, who reached out to Kirstina and I and said, I want to try and find ways that we can showcase what's going on in Scotland and some of the environmentally conscious technologies and ideas that are being developed. north of the border. And from there, we started to think, okay, what could we do to really show that Scottish space companies are thinking about doing things, the right way and trying to be more sustainable? So Kirstina and I spent a couple of weeks just trying to figure things out. And I think we were in a pub actually in Edinburgh, strangely enough, when we came up, or Kirstina, I think, came up with the idea to set some challenges or to reach out to environmental groups, to schools, to anybody that would listen, really, the general public, and try and just generate some really good challenges for the space sector to try and tackle, to show our willingness and our determination to engage. And around that time, I'd been thinking for a while about how we could get environmental groups to engage more with the space sector in the UK and obviously in Scotland. So I had been speaking to my sister, who's actually used to work with a lot of environmental groups, and she gave me some contacts. So I had some rather interesting conversations with some environmental groups who were a little bit sceptical, to say the least, when I reached out to them at first. And eventually we got speaking to friends of there, Scotland, and a gentleman called Richard Dixon, who's the director there. And he could really see that he was clear on the benefits of access to space for environmental groups and for society, but was really keen that we be held to account as a sector on how we actually access space. So that was the beginning of it. And then we started to talk to the environmental groups about how we do these challenges and move it all forward and come up with a workshops idea.
Yeah, that's right. And then we actually had, after we had the judges like the lovely Moriba make their decisions, we actually ran the workshops, and only the first ones for the moment, but this is an ongoing piece of work that we want to do. So it's not the end, it's the beginning, as we keep saying. And the workshops took place in May and June, where we got space industry together with the challenge setters and folks who we've asked to be solution providers. And we went as wide as we could with looking for solution providers, so not just within our sector, but also anywhere else that we think is helpful or useful. So, for example, the Scottish Whisky Association contributed from their experience because they went on a similar sustainability journey not so long ago. And the idea of the workshops, and we're going to be calling them work streams for consistency, is that we're going to make sure that in an ongoing basis, we look at sustainability of the space sector and ensure that we are growing as a sector in an environmentally responsible way with key colleagues like yourselves on the call. All of you have actually contributed to the campaign, which has been fantastic.
Okay, and the learnings, actions, we're going to touch on some of those. We're going to visit some of those themes that we've kind of all briefed on, but any actions, learning that came out from you had an event, right? So sort of the challenge campaign just culminated in a webinar with lots of people signing up for it. Can you talk a little bit about that? What were the outcomes and learning?
So the summit itself took place last week. Was it last week?
Yeah.
Yes, gosh, it feels like it was ages ago now. So we had 430 people sign up to the actual summit, which was amazing. And we had kind of on average about 200 people in the room at any given point. And during the summit, we had the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, open, and then Ivan McKee, who is the Minister of Trade at Scottish Government, talk about the importance of this work, which was fantastic. We then had our challenge setters and our judges talk about what actually happened and the key kind of outcomes from the workshops, and it seems to be there's specific actions coming out. So one of them is to create an open library for people to use different space data and contribute. And we have specific goals to enter into hackathons, one for NASA and one for maybe ESA, if we can find the time to do that. Hopefully we can. It's just coming up quite soon for part of one of them, but there's lots of work. Specific actions to look at actually understanding what the knock-on effect is of the space sector as well, which is brilliant. So the summit kind of pulled that together and gave the challenge leads a chance to present back what they've done so far and to, again, encourage people to join up. And the same call goes out to everyone who's on the call today. If you feel like you're a solution provider, if you feel like you want to contribute, we definitely want to hear from you and work with you going forward. During the summit we also spoke with the ESA Director General and presented on the ESA Charter for Sustainability, which was particularly exciting. So hopefully we can align activities of the UK with our colleagues in ESA, which is 22 member states.
Yeah. I think that was the things that was so exciting was the international collaboration that's going on through this initiative. It might have been started in the Scottish Space Leadership Council, but the fact that we've got Moriba here and ESA were involved really showed the international interest in what we're doing. And it feels like the time is now to really turn these discussions into actions.
Yeah, and here we are on a Swiss-based Berlin-run thing, sort of talking about this too, and SpaceWatch Café. So I think also, you mentioned Scotland actually has a space minister, right? Ivan McKee is actually the minister for space. That's quite a title, and he was
well, space falls into his remit, so we kind of we call him the space minister. He's got a longer title, but that's easier. I think he quite likes it.
Likes being, I'm sure he does. Of course, he gets lots of kudos with his kids or grandchildren if he's old enough to have them. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, so great. Thank you for that. Let's now think about some of the, what are the next steps, therefore, from this Scotland space industry, the challenges and the prize to be won from doing this, because, no pain, no gain. But I think there will be prizes in actually trying to lead by example, as we've said. Here's some context. How can the UK and Scotland, and by the way, for anybody listening in, Scotland is part of the UK, and on the Scottish Space Leadership Council, we have representatives of across the UK. So it's not a kind of a Scotland club. It's just that Scotland is kind of leading the way. If you saw the first version of this, the Space Café Scotland, you'll have heard, the number of spaceports and things we have. So how can we bring together, or any country bring together business, economy, science, and assure a responsible space activity and use of what is a finite space around our planet, LEO in particular. So let's talk about the investment and the new technology, the capabilities, the science, and the really big one, the governance that can be brought to play. Like for example, funding or not funding companies who don't adhere to a sustainable space charter. For example, pretty radical, but there you go. Scotland and the UK boasts nano and CubeSats, launchers, spaceports, and considers that to be the end-to-end capability. And I don't want this to sound critical, but criticism, but there is no end-to-end supply chain responsibility or accountability for the problems that all of those industries and activities will cause in space. So the buck will just get passed on to your customer, your user of your technology. No one owns the problem, no one ever will, and companies will continue to think, well, maybe they'll do something about it. I just make and supply what they want to buy. I think, Max, you raised this in sort of our little debriefing, there's something to do with the supply chain. And, very often if you become an approved supplier of a company, for example, they don't just ask you about your own policies, but they ask you about how do you purchase. And, and you get credits if you actually, take those same principles down through the supply chain. So there's something for us to think about. Kirstina, are you able to take us through what the ESA Sustainable Space Charter, or anyone else? But is Kirstina, are you able to sort of?
I can definitely happily summarize. Yes. So the ESA Sustainable Space Charter is a voluntary document that we believe should be signed in real life at COP26 is the idea at the moment. And it's something that the European Space Agency have developed as a voluntary subscription, almost, to say that as a company, as an organization, you are keen and willing to become sustainable. There are 4 different criteria in the actual charter, which I cannot remember off the top of my head, but I'm very happy to share afterwards. But the idea is that they have specific values that expect companies to demonstrate, and it's very strong sustainability developed, and it's been co-developed from what I understand. And it's open now, so if organizations are listening in and they're thinking, oh, this sounds great, that's something you can subscribe to at the moment. But I think the kind of big unveil is going to be during COP26 for companies and organizations.
Excellent. So, if you want to get badged and be seen as, being a shining light for doing things, which is sustainable. Yes, earning money, advancing human, observations, and doing all those wonderful things we do, but get it with a badge of sustainable and careful activity. So, Moriba, maybe you could explain. You could explain also there's the space sustainability rating that's also just been launched, which is, if I understand, MIT, ESA, you participated in that. That's maybe something that could help Scotland sign up to, perhaps. Over to you.
Yeah, so thank you, Angela, and everybody. Right, so the World Economic Forum, a couple of years ago, actually initiated this thing called the Space Sustainability Rating, and basically it would be a way to incentivize people to do things that led towards minimizing space environmental impact and all these things. And so that was initially led, as you said, by the European Space Agency, their space debris office at ESOC in Darmstadt, and then with MIT, Bryce Technologies, and University of Texas at Austin. That press release was made just a couple of weeks ago, and the Space Sustainability Rating, or the SSR for short, is now transitioning to phase 2, where it's going to be operationalized, and this is going to be led out of the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, out of the eSpace. And yeah, we're very much looking forward to this. It's something for not just space operators and owners, but also for manufacturers and all that. So it does kind of incorporate a way to provide this sort of rating, across the gamut from cradle to grave, so to speak. And it's something that's going to be maintained dynamically, meaning you just don't get a rating based on what you propose that you're going to do, and then voila, forget about it. That's it. You're actually going to be monitored, and the rating is going to be dynamic, and so because it has to be, and so that's part of it as well. So it's very complex actually, and has lots of moving parts, but it's not cast in stone, and so. Back to the relevance, for Scotland, is that Scotland has an opportunity to not only be an advocate and adopter of the SSR, but also provide input in shaping what the SSR is and how it actually does incentivize sustainable behavior. Because so far, we just have an initial point of departure for implementing this. And oh, by the way, several companies have already submitted themselves as test candidates for the SSR. SpaceX is one of them. So anyway, so it's been very interesting to see how these people have been rated and what their feedback is as a consequence. But yeah, this is an opportunity for Scotland to be a part of that.
So it's a bit like getting an organic sort of stamp of approval. If you say that you're selling organic food, then they do look through all of your processes and the origin, the way you treat stuff, etc. So it's a really so that's great. So it's almost like a stamp of sustainable rating. Love that. SSR. Remember it. Look it up. So moving on, I would ask as well. What needs to be done. What government investment and funding and R&D to foster, the required science, the technology to innovate, by industry and academia. And Max, this is one for you. There's a big topic called, and I think you brought it up, designing things properly and responsibly. If you don't design it responsibly and properly, then it's in the space environment could start to cause problems. Could you touch on some of those topics and what would their impact be, and what are the current standards, and what could be done in terms of developing new products and services?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Angela, for the question. There is certainly the need of a long-term program with some defined milestones and a clear direction to develop methods, study, the consequences of what we do. So there are bodies like ESA who has been working on this for a long time. The European Commission also invested in this kind of research for quite a long time. I think if we look at Scotland, I mean, this interest in sustainability is more recent, and therefore what I would see is as part of the space strategy of the country, there is the need to define a clear program of activities that guarantee a continuity of funding with a clear direction. Mm-hmm. So there is research that needs to be done because we still don't fully understand a number of things, especially thinking of a future in which the number of objects will increase, the traffic will increase, the way we use space also will change compared to the past. We are still probably anchored to what was happening before the private sector boomed and took almost over the development of space products.
Mm-hmm. So things like design, we talked about things like design for demise, avoiding single-use satellites. I mean, that's like single-use plastic, right? I mean, these concepts can still be applied. It's going to cost money to develop these. It's going to be, but this could be the differentiator for companies that wanted to invest into that. And the other thing is when things do, if we, deorbiting, the whole deorbiting issue, we've been sticking stuff up there gleefully, but the time has come where they're going to reach that deorbit moment, and it's really just beginning. And so things like if we don't do this, if we don't manage it, you mentioned, maybe you could talk to us about, explain what the Kessler effect is, or what 10 to the -4 is. It good enough for the future? These kinds of things. Can you give us some insight to those aspects? And
yeah. So first of all, there is this idea that we can solve the problem by just disposing of objects, and it's a little bit like with garbage on Earth. We have this idea that we can park the garbage somewhere, and that was the approach, or is the approach that has been used so far. But for example, you mentioned re-entry and the casualty risk for things that come down. That makes sense if you have very few re-enter events, and few of these, of course, can generate fragments that hit the ground. But if we increase the volume of objects that enter the atmosphere, then maybe we need to revisit that 10 to the -4. And we might also think of the level of pollution that we are inducing by more objects demising in the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. And the same for graveyard orbits. Some graveyard orbits we know already that are not ideal. There are other ideas to change possible graveyard orbits. We know also that if we increase the number of objects in medium Earth orbit, the solutions that are available at the moment might not be working as we expect because of the combination of perturbations and gravity forces. So definitely we need to think of the future of space differently. Designing objects to be serviced, to be removed is certainly a way. There are initiatives that are already thinking of designing satellites differently, not as a monolithic object, but as a modular system that can have parts removed, repaired. So that is a completely different way of thinking, of course, that would lead to a different decision by primes and system integrators.
So that's kind of like a repurposing of bits of space junk, for example, is another,
Can I just add to that, Angela? And just, I don't know if people are aware, but from the Scottish side, that's something that Spire do at the moment, is that they have satellites that have software on them that's updatable, which means that they can be useful for much longer than they have been before. So there's a little bit of that leadership coming from Scotland already, which is quite good to see. Sorry, just completely just remember that as Max was talking.
No, and you know, and the other thing is someone tell me, you know, I've heard Skyrora is also, you know, making sure that the bits that they discard as they launch, that's the launch, one of the launch companies in Scotland, and they're looking at, you know, not just discarding the bits after the launch into you know, into space, but actually gathering them up and taking care of them. I think it's, you know, clean up space. It's the next bit that I was going to move on to with you know, Moriba. Maybe you could explain, you know, what is happening, what needs to happen. You know, for example, you know, companies and states, should they be obliged to clean up after they use space? And, you know, how could that be achieved? We're touching here on some of those. And then maybe also talk about, you know, the space object debris, you know, you can't say it often enough, you know, the whole space traffic management and the space situation awareness. You know, what needs to happen? What needs to happen that would be, you know, real changes in this, in the mentality, the way we use it around the world, the way we kind of show leadership. Certain countries or you know, regions of the world show leadership, and the others sort of feel obliged to follow.
Yeah, so I would say, you know, this is a mantra that I have my students recite over and over again, which is, if you want to know something, you have to measure it, and if you want to understand something, you have to predict it. And I think, you know, clearly, I think there's a lot of truth in that, and certainly when it comes to trying to manage, you know, the space environment, we can't manage what we don't know, and we don't know what we don't measure. You know, one example of this is the UN Office of Outer Space Affairs. They said, look, you know, we have these treaties, but we actually don't have a great idea of how these things are being interpreted and implemented. And that's important. I hear lots of people say, oh, well, you know, we don't have space laws. We have actually lots of space law, Outer Space Treaty, and a bunch of, you know, liability and damage, registration of space objects, and so on. But what we have is we have a very wide variety of interpretation of something that's common. So the language is common to all these countries that signed up to it. The interpretation is not standardized. And so the practice of it is also not standardized. And so if we want to try to actually protect the space environment for long term, we have to be better predictors of how that evolves. We have to be better predictors of, given a common situation, how will people actually behave or respond to it, and these sorts of things. And that's still very much, you know, unknown. Lots of people are launching stuff in space, making decisions in the absence of knowing and understanding the decision-making processes of other people in this common finite environment. That's a recipe for disaster for sure. Yeah. And so I think that there's a real need to actually understand, measure, quantify how people are interpreting and implementing these things. And even when it comes to the guidelines for debris mitigation, who's compliant and who isn't. And that's not to say that there's malice in the non-compliance. It's just simply we need to measure these things, quantify them, because as a consequence of then quantifying these things, that will shed insight into what the next steps need to be.
Okay, and I think I've also heard you mention before that even, you know, getting people to register the right amount of stuff so that we know we've got enough information.
Yeah. So I mean, let me put it this way, right? It's like, and I can put a link to the work that we did here, but the actual language in the treaty says register your object as soon as practicable. As soon as practicable. I don't know. My thinking is that if I launch an object, maybe within the next few weeks after the launch, I should probably submit the registration stuff to the UN, which is not complicated. It's like an email it's trivial. I think some people still even use fax machines, whatever those things are. And so, yeah, I would think weeks later, right? But no, it turns out there are countries that interpret that and implement it, they take three years or more to actually send in these like 6 pieces of information about the object. My guess is that that was not the intent of the treaty, to take years after the thing's on orbit to register it. But we can't even have a conversation unless we understand and see these sort of cultural or geopolitical signatures in how people are implementing these things. Once we quantify that, then we can sit with these countries at a common table, right, and say, look, we've noticed a pattern in how you register your stuff, and it would actually be more useful if instead of 3 years, maybe 3 months after, if you could register this stuff, could you please, pretty please with sugar on top, these sorts of things, right? So I think that's what I'm trying to propose.
Yeah. You know, I mean, just to give people a perspective, we participate, myself and my fellow director participate on the NATO space weather. I know you do as well, Moriba, and so it's a committee. And it had, there was a conference recently, and there was a brilliant, actually, one of the main investors, Seraphim Capital, and he mentioned this really intriguing statistic that today, if you imagine there's 20,000 active satellites, let's say, it's a quarter of all the Facebook data in a given 24-hour period, 1/4 today. 5 years' time, it's predicted it's going to be 50 times. There'll be so many satellites up there. It'll be 50 times the volume of data will be gathered in a one day of that of Facebook. So we're going from 1/4 to 50 times. Now imagine the amount of piece of equipment that means we've got up there. And if nobody's registering for 3 years, how do we manage this finite space? So I just leave that to ponder over for folks. It kind of put it into perspective for me. I was going to ask Daniel as well Daniel, maybe you could explain sort of important policy influencing. How does the Scottish Space Leadership Council, so we're back to the actionable stuff, it policy influences, it industry shapes the Scottish Space Leadership Council. How does that happen? And therefore, how would it help, to sort of structure, structure a policy for Scotland to be, if you make leading by example for a sustainable new space industry. Can you pick that up, Daniel? Maybe?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we are developing a space strategy in Scotland at the moment, and sustainability is very much at the heart of that. But as you mentioned earlier, Angela, as well, space policy and law, it's not something that's devolved to Scotland. So we do have to work very closely with colleagues across the UK to make real change. But, it's exciting for us, in the Leadership Council and the initiative that we worked on, that we had, the First Minister come along and speak at that initiative. And, so many people from across government get involved, from Scottish Enterprise and other agencies too. And it really shows that Scotland's taken this very seriously, the sustainability angle. And so we should. I mean, at the same time, we've got 5 developing spaceports in Scotland, throughout the UK. Of the 7 that are here, we've got 2 orbital launch vehicles that are both working hard to do things, to do launch in a more sustainable way. And then you've got more satellites being built in Scotland than anywhere else in Europe, small satellites. And in terms of the downstream, the data side, companies like GSI and AstroSat and Ecometrica and Manos are all doing amazing things with space data to help the environment. And Edinburgh's positioned itself as the space data capital of Europe. So I feel like we've got the right to be doing this, but also the responsibility to be pushing this forward. And initiatives like the ESA Charter and the SSR that we've talked about today, I don't know if Scotland can sign these things, but we need to be working with UK colleagues to make sure that as many organisations as possible do sign up to them, so we can move things forward.
Yeah, and I touched on earlier, there is actually, as a business, Think Tank Maths, we sign. For example, there's the Scottish Business Pledge, and if you apply for any support for a project from a government support for a project, then you're asked, have you signed the Business Pledge? And the Business Pledge is about being, a fair employer. It's about having, not using things which we call here 0 hours contracts, which are considered in some cases exploitative behavior. But it also means your environmental asks you have to go through an entire sort of criteria to state that and become a business pledged company, an accepted business pledged company. So we could, if we're saying it's environment, it's not a wild stretch, for example, that we could add in being environmentally responsible in order to create a sustainable space environment. We could, we could sort of bolt that piece on and add that interpretation to that piece. And as I said in the beginning, maybe a step which is within the control of the Scottish government, if you like, is they don't fund. If you don't sign up to it, then you don't get grants if you don't comply. It's bold, it's brave, but it's something that I'm sure we can have. And I think this is the thing as well with within particularly the Scottish environment, and we do lead the way. We play our part as a 4-nation group, but we very often in other parts of the UK do this. They take a lead, and it pushes on sort of, if you like, the UK position on things. So we could lead the way on that without it being a piece of devolved power to the Scottish Parliament, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely agree, Angela, for sure.
Yeah. So I cut this Max, back to you. Before we hand over to our space watchers who are putting there's lots of questions in here. I use this term, the canary in the mine. Basically it means, it's an early warning signal of unexpected things. So the unexpected things that will go wrong in space caused by human activity. And you alluded a bit to that, a bit earlier when you're saying, there's certain parts of what we don't know, how we're perturbations into, the magnetic forces that are at play. And, these are things that will just catch us unsuspectedly. But, is there, what can we do? I in the past, for example, humans have experienced using chlorofluorocarbons. We were solving another problem, and then we discovered that it was destroying the ozone. You just have to watch. I would recommend if you want to see that. It's actually a good news story in the end. There's a documentary movie called The Shattered Sky, and the whole story of that, how humanity understood what it was doing and stopped producing this stuff and changed its behavior. And plastics, we're now, pervasively, plastics are in the sea, they're in every food chain across the planet. As a species, we really don't have a good track record at acting with caution as we innovate and try to, what we think is improve the quality of life for more people around the planet. And nor at times do we always act with transparency on those. And, I'll skirt around the whole what's going on with the oil and gas sector at this point in time in various parts of the world. So what are the potential unexpected negative consequences of all this space activity, Max? And, the industry will not and cannot invest in, and academia must be funded to do. I think it's a perfect role for academia. Would you like to take that over and touch on that?
First of all, maybe let me say that I think we had already many dead birds in the past, so it's not that we are waiting to see the next canary dying. I think there were already many canaries who died, and no one really paid too much attention. I think partially because we look at things in isolation. And so people who look at re-entry, they look only at the problem of, say, the casualty risk. And people that are concerned about space traffic management, they are now concerned about automating collision avoidance. But there is a more global problem that needs to be understood. Okay, we have an increase, for example, in the amount of energy that we are beaming down to Earth because of the increase of the satellites that are out there and are broadcasting. As I said before, we have an increase of things that demise in the atmosphere because of more things deorbiting. So you mentioned before the STARDUST program. That's something that started, in fact, in 2013. We had the first grant from the European Commission. And now STARDUST R is the second installment, again supported by the European Commission. We have, in fact, 28 partners globally in the world. Moriba is one of the partners, in fact. And we are trying to look at space environment management a bit more globally. But when we started in 2013, there were already the signs that, of course, something was going wrong. There was already the collision in 2009. But people were still thinking, oh, is it actually a problem or not? And this new space movement was booming, and people were much more concerned about the economic return. And so the government was more investing in putting more stuff into orbit than in trying to understand the long-term consequences of what was happening. So definitely companies might not have an interest if they are not guided in some way. Definitely do not have the resources at the moment to understand the global consequences of what they do. So I agree there should be a constant investment in fundamental research to understand what can happen in the future.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned before in our conversation about the increased, I think that's what you're saying, energy, the increased use of microwaves and the impact on the electromagnetic pollution, etc. Do we even conceive what that could mean? And it's handling stuff on Earth like the plastics on into the ocean. We can stop that and do something, but out there in low Earth orbit and beyond that, once it's up there, it's we really are not, we really don't have all the levers to kind of pull that back a lot. And the impact that this could have is one big mess of space, and that's really, the impact of that would become so reliant on the services that we can have by using this wonderful part of round the Earth. So what I think it's time to pass over to, we'll come back and we'll maybe get some wrap up afterwards, but hand over to, is it Frank or is it someone going to, no, I think it's Chiara. Is Chiara going to, some questions from people watching? Anybody within the chat? Let's have a look-see.
So, while people look for able-bodied folks that have questions for us, I guess to follow up on what Max said, I think that one of the major issues is that people don't properly respect the problem. It is a complex system. People look at these things independently, but with complex systems, there's all these interdependencies that we don't know. We have nonlinear causal relationships. Small things can have huge consequences. The behavior of the system isn't explained by superposition. You can't just add individual behaviors and voila, you get the behavior of the space domain. That does not apply here. So it really is a complex system, and it's the textbook definition of a wicked problem where you have competing interests and even conflicting evidence and that sort of stuff. It needs to be evaluated holistically. And until that happens, I think we're just going to keep on arguing with each other about what we believe is happening up there, and everybody's going to be a little bit right and a little bit wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's another thing that could be of value that Scotland can add, because we are a smaller country. We're almost like a living lab. So because we are well connected, I mean, we have like 1 degree of separation at a given point. We could try and do something that's a bit different, but because of that connectivity, and like you said, Moriba, it is a complicated system up there, but we're also talking about things down here on the ground and what we're doing more widely with the spaceports and the launching and the data that comes down and the analysis, and how do we do that sustainably, and it has a knock-on effect as well. So hopefully we can find, as part of the Sustainable Space Challenges, but just more widely through these kinds of conversations, a way to trial something out that's never been done before, because we have the interest. It's a good time to do it, and if we succeed, we save the planet and the surrounding, the surrounding ecosystem around the planet as well.
Yeah, we have some questions from the audience as well.
Do we? Okay.
Yes,
good.
we do, definitely. Let me see. The first question of Ashley. She asks, is there any kind of nations Scotland wants to do trade and collaborations with, such as Canada, for example, similar to the Space Bridge initiative between the UK and Australia?
Yeah, I think I can probably take that one. So I think we're definitely open to all collaborations. We've had some really good workshops, virtual workshops with Belgium, Germany, and others throughout the last year. And obviously we're part of the Space Bridge initiative with the UK as well. We've got Expo Dubai coming up, World Expo later this year, and we're looking to speak to Australia and Canada and really anybody. And I think when it comes to sustainability, it's a great chance to work collaboratively with other countries, during these events and push things forward, because we can't do it on our own. We're quite happy to be the leaders on this, but it needs to be international, of course. So yeah, we're open to any collaboration.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And we also have a question from Teresa. Where she asks, is there a coordinated effort to have these issues raised at the COP26? Which is also very interesting, actually. Yeah? I see some thoughts here and there.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's going to be coming up at COP26. So the same as Space Challenges will hopefully feature as part of a kind of wider network of people. So the Knowledge Transfer Network and Space for Climate are collating the overall UK picture, and we'll be able to present some of the things that we're doing already, and we'll have done hopefully by then at COP26. Absolutely. And there's also a universities COP26 group where we're pulling together and demonstrating what research is being done, kind of exactly what Max was saying currently about the environment particularly, and showcasing the UK leadership in that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you so much. I think we answered all the questions from the audience for now.
Okay.
So Angela?
Yeah, no, look, I think there's, we touched on all the topics that when I wanted to pull us all together and talk about this. I think we've touched on all of those aspects of the best practices and the things that people are doing around the world, and how we can form our strategy and our economic plans for here, and be doing that as a thought leader, as an exemplar for other places. Not that we're alone. I was thrilled to hear, Moriba, the kind of people you're saying, that SpaceX is signing up to the SSR. I think that's great, because, and it is, and people sort of saying, test me out. It's a bit like saying, test out my cyber security, someone hack me and see if my company's hackable. Then it's great that people are stepping up with that frame of mind as well, to it. So it's really, really pleased. I think there's been lots of ticks and boxes here, and I do think, as I say, we will move forward, and we will report on progress that we make in this part of the world, and we'll certainly be watching to see what everyone else is doing elsewhere, and participate with them. Any other points?
Yeah, I would say that the single most important thing that the Scottish government could do immediately is to establish this computational infrastructure to serve as a digital library, digital commons, for researchers, industry, and government to share data, a place that has curated information, has everything from sensor data to semantic information, from policies, guidelines. So a digital commons regarding the domain and that sort of stuff that can be leveraged by a wide variety of stakeholders, so that there's harmonization of these things, and that's for sure is wrapped up in I think the first and third of the sustainability challenges, and if Scotland doesn't do anything else, doing that would be very disruptive in a positive way.
Yeah, and be a great contribution to the efforts around the world. I think this is it's a beautiful thing about it. It knows no boundaries up there, right? So wonderful. Any other questions coming in? Any other questions? No, I just see people sort of saying and chatting nicely sort of amongst themselves, which is brilliant. Look, I want to thank everybody who's been part of this conversation. I think we've all really put our heads together to come up with, I think, a serious proposition, a list of actionable things. You know, it stemmed from great work on the sustainable challenges, where we all participated in that in one way or another, whether it was workshops, judges, or the creation of it, and the outputs from that we're going to be turning and putting into, as Daniel said, into the Scottish space strategy. So that's I think that winds up that piece. Our next, maybe if I can move to talk about what we'll be doing next here on the Space Café Scotland. So you can join us on, I think you will confirm this, but I think the 2nd of September, again at 1500 hours, 3 o'clock British, will it be British summertime then, or will it be GMT by that point? But 4 o'clock in Central European time. And we'll be exploring space as a force for social mobility and powerful personal motivation. And it's a bit hackneyed this, but you know, why the sky is not the limit. With some guests who are Scottish school kids, etc., and others who've been involved in, in sort of like the NASA Space School and other things, where it's about getting people involved, early ages, different roles. Where some of these people are already living their dream. So that's what we want to do. We want to get, social mobility, powerful personal motivation, and why does space do this, and what is it that got them excited and engaged? And it's something that people around the world as well will want to know, because we want to have the best scientists and the best thinkers and the best planners and project managers and all those things working in this domain to help us all get it right. So thank you each and all, and to everyone who's logged on. And I suppose traditionally, before I hand back, I have to say those magic words, don't I? As I'm a space watcher, as is my colleague there over in Texas. And so is everybody else on this call, even if they don't have a t-shirt, as we say before. So thank you very much.
If you get us a t-shirt, we'll wear the t-shirt next time, Angela.
There you go.
Getting the mug is also important.
Yeah. All right, cheers everybody.
Right, I think it's we hand back, and there's some wrapping up, I think, for the team at SpaceWatch.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you so much. And thank you all, of course. It was a really nice conversation to hear. And I'm very happy to be here as well. Let me see. So, we will follow up on our upcoming events. The first one is on the 6th of July, 2001 at 1 p.m. CEST, and the 30 minutes with Professor Enrico Stoll of TU Berlin, who will be delving into the 30 years of small satellite development of TU Berlin. On the 8th of July 2021 at 4 p.m. CEST, Space Café Germany by Andreas Schepper with the German rocket star Daniel Metzler of Aerospace will also be held. This episode, however, will be held in German, so please mind that. On the 22nd of July 2021 at 9:30 a.m. CEST, Space Law Breakfast in the summer edition with Stephen Freeland and his guests Elena Morozova and Andrei Mistal will take place as well. So all our events are online on Eventbrite. And as always, we would like to hear from you on Facebook. So please check in with us on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn, anywhere on social media. And of course, don't forget to sign up for our daily or bi-weekly newsletters of SpaceWatch.Global. And if you like to treat yourselves with something special, like Angela already said, with a t-shirt or a nice mug, become a Space Watcher today and show your support. This will, of course, help us. So take out your credit card and visit our fan shop at shop.SpaceWatch.Global. I know that I repeat myself, but we really do need your support to continue our work. Thank you all very much for this interesting day. Thank you, Angela and Moriba, Kirstina, Daniel, Massimiliano, for our inspiring talk and being our guest. And thanks again to the entire team behind the scenes for doing this great job week by week again. And thank you, ESA Space Solutions, for their great support as well. I hope you all will stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you for joining us. I hope to see you all next week. And in the meantime, please visit our website and follow us on our social media. And again, don't forget to become a space watcher, please.
Yep.